Today we're visiting the Tate Britain. It's an art gallery on Millbank, just to the west of the Houses of Parliament. Closest tube station is Pimlico. Tate Britain has a really eclectic collection of very modern, fairly modern, impressionist, a lot of 19th and 18th century paintings, and a particularly good collection of Turners. So Tate Britain was founded in 1897. It was originally called the National Gallery of British Art. 1932 they changed it to the Tate Gallery, and then in 2000 Tate Modern opened, and various Tates around the country like St Ives, Margate have spread out the collection. But here you have a specifically British lean. Inside here you have the cupola, beautiful marble staircase which was refurbished about a decade ago. So it's keying black and white tones as you go up the spiral to the ground floor, which is actually where you come in from the front, through to this beautiful front design which is keyed in the balustrade as well as the floor itself. I'm not going to go around the whole museum looking at every painting. If you want to do that, you should visit. It's definitely a very good collection and a very thorough collection. I must admit, at the far end there, you can see the Turners. That's definitely my favourite bit. Here, as we come in, a lot of very bold, modernist, early 20th century paintings, some interesting sculptures, and it's thematically arranged both by era and style, so there's a consistency within each room. It's very nicely curated. I love this little crouching man here. It's a very old building. I think the building goes back to 1897, and the building itself has been sort of modernized in terms of lost the flooring, the colors of choice. There's a few rooms that are very original in terms of that 19th century floor to ceiling painting look, but generally it's a very modern experience. It's almost a cathedral of art with a very British and very modern lean to it. It's again more rooms here, some intriguing sculptures. I must admit, I'm not the biggest modern fan. If you like modern art, this is definitely some very strong work. This gallery, I believe, is a sort of travelling and arranging one, so it's not always the same art in each room. I came here a year ago and this was quite a different collection. If you like these rooms, then Tate in Liverpool, Margate and St Ives will definitely be to your taste as well. Very interesting abstract painting. If we go through to here, this is Henry Moore collection. Henry Moore, he lived outside of London, but a lot of his work was in London, and he's got some excellent paintings and sculptures here. I particularly like the seated, I believe it's King and Queen in the next room. But the bronzes are very obviously Henry Moore. This one in particular screams Henry Moore. And here in the corner is the model of this piece. So you can see the original model that was developed compared to the actual final bronze. And when we get to the Turner section, I love Turner and Constable. You have the actual palettes they worked on the walls. And this is the King and Queen. It's an interesting sort of modernist take on Greek and Athenian. There's a small shop here. There is a much bigger shop as well, but and probably the biggest if you want an art bookshop in a museum is Tate Modern down the river from here. Then again, more carvings, sculptures, paintings. It's very striking colours and uses, texture. Although the Tate galleries in Liverpool and Margate are quite interesting collections, I think it's not unfair to say that the Tate Britain has a higher quality, better known, better names. It's more, Margate has more a eclectic collection of modern. Liverpool especially, it's kind of, yes, it's modern, but here you see famous artists, whereas at the others you tend to see a bit more artists you've not heard of, probably won't again, who are apparently very good. This room, I love the floor in here. I mean, very striking forms here, but I love the floor. It's very ornate and detailed mosaic from the early 20th century. And if we look up in a moment, you can see the beautiful roof. Hopefully I remembered to look up at that point. And through there is the main shop. It is quite a large shop with a lot of Tate related materials. I think it's fair to say Tate is always free to go in. The gift shop is probably a little on the pricey side. That's how they pay for it. One of the things to understand with museums in Britain is that most of them are free. So some fantastic collections, which would be very expensive in a lot of countries, they're free because they're given a tax exemption, and they're exempt from that tax provided they give free entry. So they still ask for donations at the door, but they're entirely voluntary. Some interesting portraits here. As you can see, a fairly quiet museum, not as busy as, say, the National Gallery, the Portrait Gallery, the Tate Modern. Really, Tate Modern took over as the principal Tate museum people go to in London now. Because of its central location, it's a very grand building, it's a very good collection of modern art. But I love Tate Britain. It's much more calm, quiet, and an interesting space. It's a beautiful old building with still a very good collection. Impressionist. A street scene from London with the old omnibuses. Dates it to pre-war, probably 1920s. Camera doesn't always do it justice, but some beautiful paintings here. Must admit, this is more my type of art than the very modern. Particularly this piece, it's very striking. It's a huge piece, very striking, really doesn't come across on the camera. And this in the corner, the boldness of the colours, it almost looks like if you asked AI to create a picture. Now this one, I'm sure the artist wouldn't like me saying, but it reminds me of Star Wars Phantom Menace, the Trade Federation drones. I'm sure George Lucas must have seen this museum at some point. And moving through to some of the slightly older paintings, there's a beautiful collection of British Impressionism, some of the transition from Impressionism to post-impressionism to modernism. There's very beautiful paintings. If Impressionism is your thing, the National Gallery has a good collection, but it's only really limited to a room. There's quite a few different collections around the UK that do, but certainly none of them are any match for the likes of the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. I love these rural scenes, very evocative of a different era. And here's one of my favourite rooms. There's a beautiful collection of 19th century paintings, particularly the Lady of Shalott in the middle there. So this is to do with the Chartists. Interesting piece. And you can see a beautiful scene from I think it's Shakespeare. I might be wrong. This painting, which I've just missed with the camera, the top one there, is actually quite a famous painting. But a beautiful collection of more 19th century. And here is the Lady of Shalott. So if you've read the poem by Tennyson, this is very much inspired by that. And this is often the painting you see along with that play when children read it in school. Beautiful triptych here. Several of these here are by Waterhouse. I won't claim he's one of the best known artists, but certainly Tate Britain has a good collection of his work. And there's a series of paintings of women section that covers portraiture of women in kind of everyday. I love that piece. Very 1920s, very. There's Florence. I think seen from the Bobley Gardens, so across the river before the Vasari corridor and the bridge were added. Here, very famous painting, beautiful. Here's some interesting work by Morris. Morris is famous for his wallpapers, his patterns. There's many a duvet cover and classic notebook covered in Morris's work, particularly the Strawberry Thief. But they've got a book there of some of his original samples. Here's beautiful paintings from the Grand Tour, 19th century religious scene there. It's quite interesting comparing some of these religious scenes, like the washing of the feet, with the earlier paintings at the National Gallery, which hopefully when that reopens we'll do a tour. Here's Jesus as the carpenter's son. That Punch and Judy show. Very striking paintings. So my here is a Canaletto. Not the best collection of Canalettos here. Actually, Chatsworth House is probably the best collection of Canalettos that I've seen in the UK. He was one of my favourite artists when I was a child. You can tell I'm a bit of a geek. Here's the Lady of Shalott again. So this is very much the most famous, the Waterhouse version, Tennyson's poem. the screen really doesn't do justice to the size of them. I think the purpose of this video is more just to give you a feel of the museum. I love this one, the Greek struggling with a snake. It's a python, and you really can see every ripple and sinew of it. And also you can see some of the fabric of the building here. The whole building is quite old, beautifully built. There's portions of it that feel quite modern, but actually they're not. Really beautiful paintings with minute detail at a very large scale. I think this is the one on the right. That's the boat race. So that's the Oxford Cambridge boat race, and this I think is Royal Ascot. So coach, omnibus. Omnibus was sort of buses before the modern day buses, and they were very full. There's an old saying, the man on the Clapham omnibus, which is effectively, it's a legal test. You know, person said such and such, how would it have been understood by the common man? And the question is by the man on the Clapham omnibus. And you see in that painting an eclectic mix of people in there. Some really powerful, large paintings. Very much different style to a lot of the museum. I just love this battle scene. There's a very striking painting when we reach the Turner section of one of Wellington at Waterloo and one of Napoleon at Waterloo, and they're very much vague impressionist battle scene, sunset backgrounds, and the two protagonists. Here, I think that's Wolfe at the Siege of Quebec. I love this era. It reminds me a lot, this room, of the final room at the National Gallery. As you walk through from the Sainsbury wing, when you've gone through to the final room on the east of Trafalgar Square, it's got a constable like this, so that's obviously a constable. I believe that's Salisbury Cathedral from the Water Meadow. I've actually tried to get to that spot, and I can tell you it's impossible today. It is still a water meadow, but you just can't get to it. I even tried to charm my way into it with the cathedral staff. Here, a very rural, idyllic scene. It's very much at that era where, well, there's a painting, The Fighting Temeraire by Turner, in the National Gallery, And as the Industrial Revolution winds up, the age of wind ends, the age of steam begins, and this rural idyll is on the one hand going, on the other hand idealized for a kind of 20-year period. Some of the great painters recorded these, although Three Children Riding a Ram is a very odd painting today. Here's some beautiful family portraits. And there's the room I mentioned earlier that's wall to ceiling. That's very much what a lot of these galleries would have looked like. When this opened in the 1850s, it probably looked much like that room next door. It was really during the 20th century that we started to hang art with enough space to absorb what was in the painting by itself, not wallpaper, the wall with large golden frames. But it's nice to sometimes see that, and it's generally kept for the rooms where they're interesting in inverted commas, but people are, maybe it's a bit harsh, not as interested as some of these like the Constables and Turners. Again, taking away the hay. It's a painting of a smithy. I'd say a very idealized view of production of iron and steel, because it would have been a pretty grubby business in the day. And here's the room with the walls completely covered. Fascinating collection of beautiful paintings. Probably none of them are that famous or well known. They're all quite striking and memorable. But there's a lot of art in here. Henry VIII up there is quite interesting, with sort of latter perspective on that. That's a view across the Thames. Thames used to be a lot wider. And here is the Canaletto I mentioned earlier. It's actually, it's a Dutch church, I think. It's an interesting piece, but certainly if you like your Canaletto, you want to go to Chatsworth House, or obviously the Uffizi in Florence. Here, this is in the centre. Through the centre of the gallery is this large room, the height of the whole building, and you really never know what you're going to get. You can get some very striking art installations. Here it's a box surrounded by industrial materials that opens and closes on a timer. I must confess it's lost on me, but hopefully someone will enjoy it watching the video. And here again, this isn't always there. This is a installation, temporary installation, but it's quite apt. Sort of church pews in this. If I come back here and turn around and look up, you can see it's a kind of 19th century cathedral, a tall towering building with the arched roof that's been amended subtly over the years. Here, this room is sort of velvet walls and velvet covered sound coverings. You go down a tunnel of that into this room where it's a video playing, and this is one of the temporary installations again, so I won't dwell too long. I'm just outside this constantly changing and evolving lights as they dim, and then they go bright, they go light. It was quite striking. It's difficult to really capture with a camera. On a camera it sort of looks like a tangle of wires, some old wooden boxes and some lights, but it is a very striking visual experience within the room itself. I skipped one room because you're not going to see it if you come. It's all very temporary exhibit, and I couldn't get it in frame. So here's some modern 20th century art. Very famous piece in the middle. I think most people recognise the formaldehyde. No, that's Damien Hirst. Actually, Damien Hirst won the Turner Prize. That made him famous, probably, or certainly to the non-art world. And the Turner Prize is still hosted here each year. You do have to pay to get in to see that, and can be controversial. Tends to be quite punchy, striking, provocative art, which is either very much to your taste or very much not. I must confess, a bit modern for my tastes. Here, this is the Turner room. So there's about 3 rooms of very large collection of paintings by Turner. And you have these sort of earlier paintings, the beautiful idyll, the stream lapping against the trees, the view over the... I believe this one is from Greenwich. It's on top of the hill where the observatory is looking across. And this is a self-portrait of Turner. And here is Turner's original palette. If you ever get the opportunity to watch the film, there's a wonderful film of Turner. It shows him as a very intriguing character. He was a brusque, rude, ill-mannered, wasn't exactly working class, but he was certainly lower middle class. He had a bit of money in the family, but he wasn't particularly educated in his speech and his behaviours. He could be ever so rude. But the art world was in love with him. They loved his use of light and tone and colour. And he was an ever popular character in the art world. And well, you have to see the film. I won't spoil it for you, but he certainly was an interesting guy. Here, these beautiful idylls, still in the early period. And his, maybe here you see a bit more of the light and darkness and shades. And he tried to evolve his art, and he definitely changed a lot as he moved more towards the impression of light, the impression of form. And you see here less detail, a little bit more white out. And in some of his later works, it really is strikingly different. They almost look like a different artist. From these rural, idyllic to broader sweeps, deeper paint, more striking use of colours, a perception of shape and form rather than an actual painting. What it's all very much that sort of post-impressionist, a lot more sunsets. And here, beautiful painting. Again, Fighting Temeraire would be the one I would go to look at in National Gallery. It's one of my favourite paintings, and a very striking piece both from history and from the art. Here, the very... I believe is that Hadley Castle. Hadley Castle's a beautiful castle just on the way to Southend, overlooking the Isle of Sheppey, I think it is. Might be wrong there. But it was saved partly as a result of that painting because it was made famous. This is Rome, seen from the Vatican itself, looking down on St. Peter's Square. Now you see what I was saying, much more descriptive, much more less the exact painting, the fine details of his earlier work, more the broad brush strokes of thick Actually, he used palette rather than brush a lot in the later years, so a lot more texture to give a feeling of emotion rather than the actual painting. So some very beautiful pieces. Venice. This is definitely Venice. That's the Bridge of Sighs between the prison and the Doge's palace. And then after the Turner section, just a quick review as we leave. You have the cupola, you have this beautiful marble. I think it cost about £3.5 million to put in this marble floor and this staircase, and it really is very striking. It's a beautiful key between the modern and the old, the new and classical. And we'll end here with Turner, because I think no visit to Tate Britain is complete without the Turner collection, and I hope you'll visit.